What's up, IndieFlix fam? Today, we're breaking down the Traitors US Season 4, Episode 4, titled Cut the Heads Off the Snake. This episode is one of the most aggressive of the season so far. We get a face-to-face murder, a chaotic challenge with shields on the line, intense social dynamics, and a breathtaking roundtable that culminates in one of the most emotional banishments yet. This one changes the momentum of the game. Let's dive in. The episode picks up again at breakfast. Remember last episode, we had those that were vulnerable for a murder, tied up to trees. It was the ideal horror film for them, but we don't know who was able to see the traitors. So the first groups of people that started coming into breakfast were obviously the ones who weren't up for murder, and they strategically came up with a plan to ask each person who was up for murder what exactly happened, just to see if stories align and any details are left out, to maybe narrow down possibly that one of those people that were tied up could be a traitor themselves. Or if they were a traitor, they won't know as much of specific details to those that were tied up on the trees, which I think, yes, this strategy is okay to a certain extent, because regardless of whose story is right or wrong, the traitor knows how it played out. They were also there. So yeah, well, I guess we'll see how when people start talking. I understand, details are missed, but everybody describes and explains things differently. So I think this was a hard challenge in itself to figure out who could be lying or not. But let's get into what was said. So Ron is one of the first to come into breakfast from being a potential murderer, and he goes on about his story. What stuck out to me was he had mentioned that he believes it's about 3 traitors, just off of the footsteps or whatever he heard. It's so ironic he says this, because this was one of the reasons why he said Portia was a traitor, because she said, oh, there's 3 traitors. He was in remember his whole thing, oh, how would you know that if you're not a traitor? He literally does the same thing. So he's the first one. They're getting the first story, so they don't know if he's telling the truth or not. He basically says, there was a henchman there. He had a mask on. Hands were tied up on the tree. They cut the rope. That's how I know it was safe. So it just really stuck out to me that of all people, the person that narrows down an amount of traitors and still not known because you're blindfolded, still called out a number. And that was the same reason he tried to use in his case to get rid of a Portia who was a faithful. Next was Lisa. Lisa came in, and I'm not gonna lie, I was a little nervous for Lisa. But again, she's a traitor, so she was able to see what the scene looked like. And they started asking her questions. They did, even Monet tried to trick her up when she brought up the henchman. He was like, they had a gold mask on, right? And she quickly came around and, was like, no, it was black. So she saved herself there. The problem with Lisa, though, she was given too much. And I watch Real Housewives, so I already know her personality. That's just her personality. She's a lot, right? But when you say too much, that's when people still start looking at you like, all right, like Natalie caught. Lisa has said or mentioned that she said to the traitors, I'm a really good faithful. And Natalie even pointed out, like, why would you even say that to the traitors? Like, because then they're going to want to get you out. And she's right. And I'm surprised nobody else really clocked that, because that would have had me had a red flag. Like, yeah, why would you plead your case to them, letting them know you're a faithful? Because then in my mind as a traitor, you got to go. But nobody clocked it. So Lisa was good. She was saying the same details. She added a little more. She mentioned there was an axe there, which had people kind of side-eyeing Ron because he didn't mention that part. But like I said, everybody explains their story differently. So, Lisa, you got off good, girl. Next person that walked into breakfast with Eric. Again, he shared the same stories that the other 2 did. But he added a little thing. He also said that he had a hint, and he wasn't willing to share that hint yet. But all that he said that he heard was one of the traitors laughed. He told everybody what his plea was, that if they get rid of him, his faithful soul and all the other faithful souls will haunt them, blah, 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 blah. And I guess after that, the traitor laughed. And I instantly, I don't know about y'all, but I'm like, out of the three, I can imagine Candace laughing. And if that's the case, she has a very particular laugh. So I'm like, dang, girl, you done gave yourself away. Like, keep your mouth shut. But Eric at that time didn't say whose laugh he heard, which is smart, right? Keep that close and just see how people move throughout the day. But again, his story was lining up with everybody else. He felt like, I think he said that he thought it may have been like two traitors. So, which I still don't understand how y'all were blindfolded. Like, y'all never know. But yeah, he had that little hint in his story. So we find out that Caroline from Real Housewives of Dubai was the one who was murdered in the woods, and she was murdered face to face. So she was able to see who the traitors were. She was very shocked to see her fellow housewives, Candace and Lisa, being the ones who murdered her. But this was smart. This was smart because no one's going to think a housewife is going to want to get rid of another housewife, and let alone there's two housewives in this traitor group. So I think it was very smart out of all those that were up for murder to get rid of her, because Caroline really didn't have any ties. I ain't gonna lie, I barely knew Shorty was around. So this was a smart decision. It wasn't too loud and obvious for them. And I think they got away with that very smoothly. Lastly, Kristen walks in as another person who survived the night. But what in the questioning part took a turn was Jam Jam, because he was asking questions to Kristen like how long after this ceremony lasts, or something like that. And that hit Tiffany's radar. Like, why would you use a term like that if you aren't a traitor? So this is why I said you have to be careful on what you ask, how you say certain things, because people may catch on to that. And that just put Tiffany's ears and eyes on Jam Jam of being a potential traitor. So after breakfast, we really see how big-headed people can get. And by people, I'm talking about Colton. Yes, he was the person that led the charge on Donna in the last episode and getting rid of this secret traitor. But just because you got one right doesn't mean every person else that you suspect is the correct way. But here he is, big-headed and already feeling himself for getting rid of Donna. Now his new target set on Tiffany. He feels like Tiffany is a huge game player. She's orchestrating a lot of moves. She's calling out who she thinks are traitors, maybe because she's taking it off of herself. And I'm just looking at this idiot like, you are just loud and wrong. Like, I can't stand, just because you got one right doesn't mean it's your intuition every time. And clearly, because we know who the traitors are, he's clearly wrong. I thought for a moment he was working alongside with Tiffany. So Colton, if you keep going down this route, you're gonna be next, buddy. People gonna start looking at you like, all right, here he go, name dropping and so focused and charged on one person with no good evidence. Tiffany, watch your back. The first big beat of episode 4 is the Woods Challenge, where the contestants hunt for hidden spears and they light them on fire. And everybody starts off with a shield, but if you're burned, if they throw their spear and yell your name, then your shield is on fire. So this is one of those traders missions that look physical, but it also does function socially. Performance here impacts who feels competent and who becomes vulnerable. And during this challenge, several players lose shield protection based on performance and social positioning, which puts them at risk later in this episode. And there are a lot of names now at risk for murder. So there were 8 people who are now ineligible for a shield. One of the big names, obviously Ron being one of them, Michael. They threw in Johnny and Tara, and then Jam Jam. And then, of course, Jam Jam now being up for murder, got very emotional and started crying. And some people, did feel empathy for him. Others also thought he was faking it. So it's like, what are you crying for at this point? Like, do what you need to do and focus and get rid of a traitor, and it won't be that deep, right? But these are some of the names that were now from that challenge up for murder by the traitors. So Tara also discovered that Ron was saying her name as the person he thought was a traitor because she has, I guess, walks lightly. So that fuels her anger towards him, and that just adds another person against Ron. And we all know Ron's not a traitor. I think the biggest mess up he did was obviously the Portia thing and leading that charge without really concrete evidence. But, I think also it would be in the traitor's best interest of having him banished instead of murdered, because if they murder him, it's going to be too obvious. And everybody's thinking he's a traitor. It would just be easier for the entire group to get rid of him. Colton is still leading his charge on getting Tiffany up out of there. Again, I don't feel like what he has is concrete evidence, and he's thinking of a name and he's sticking with it. And I feel like people who do that and then try to manipulate people to also feel or think the same way, I will start looking at you type crazy, because it's like, yeah, okay, she's named other people, but so have you. Make it make sense. I will never understand why a good reason to call someone out and banish them as a traitor is because they've said names. Literally, everybody in this game says names. Like, it does not make sense to me. And yes, she is a game player because she's came from shows that was all about gameplay. And maybe that's what's the problem here, because Colton's from The Bachelor. Like, there ain't much gameplay there. You just kissing everybody. You know what I'm saying? The housewives ain't used to gameplay. All they do is yell and scream at each other. So, like, when you have these gameplay individuals from Big Brother, from Survivor, from the challenge, from whatever show they came from, where there was a prize money at the end and they had to have strategic thoughts, you just have to understand the game. Tiffany is doing what she's supposed to do as if she was in any other game. Colton, please get off of her. Please. By the time we reach the round table, emotion outweighs logic once again. The conversation centers heavily around Tiffany Mitchell, with Colton leading the charge and framing her confidence as manipulation. And I'm glad Tiffany defends herself strongly. But in this game, strong defense, it often backfires. And she's coming at Colton like, look, you're wrong. And you're just mad because I'm smarter than you. And in this case, she is. Like, Colton he can go. He just has horrible, horrible gameplay. But Tiffany doesn't even come after Colton. She actually turns the attention to Jam Jam. She feels like, yes, she admitted to Ron being in her mouth, Michael being in her mouth, and Jam Jam. She genuinely feels like Jam Jam is the traitor, and I think she's going off of what was said in Breakfast when he used the term ceremony, because that's not just a frequent term that's used amongst faithful. That is something that's discussed with traitors. So she's trying to lead the charge on getting Jam Jam up out of there. And of course, Jam Jam gets defensive, doesn't feel like it's him at all. And he's also looking at Tiffany sideways like it could possibly be you. And here comes Eric wanting to step up and say what he feels. And remember, he said earlier, oh, I got a hint. I heard them laugh. I'm a musician. I listen to pitches. I know this is what I do. I study noise and music and all that stuff. And the person I heard laugh was Tiffany. And I laughed so hard because I'm like, dang, Candace, he got you. But Tiffany... Even Tiffany said, like, you might want to get another career while you're here. Because what? Really? Unless he feels like all black women laugh the same, you are wrong, sir. Wrong. And he's just on Colton. He with Colton on this. He's trying to tell everybody, look, I heard Tiffany laugh, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like, bruh, really? And then the fact that people are actually taking it in is so freaking annoying. Like, a laugh? I would have been like, please, if I was Tiffany, I would have been like, please mimic the laugh. Please demonstrate what that laugh sounded like. And then I would have been like, has anybody else heard me laugh? Does that sound like my laugh? Please. Eric was wrong. Candace then swoops in to be Tiffany's saving grace and paints it back onto Ron, who she's felt was a traitor from day one, even though we know she's a traitor, she knows. But I think she just really wants the group consensus to get rid of Ron so she doesn't have to. And I feel for her. Like, she's like, look, I don't want us to do the same mistake we did with Portia and let this man get by again. And the evidence is not strong enough. Like, we had evidence against Ron. He was so high on Portia. That was wrong. He was Donna's partner, got her out. She's a traitor. So let's focus our attention back on Ron. And to be honest, I genuinely thought she was going to be able to turn heads away from Tiffany. I just don't feel like the evidence against Tiffany was that concrete to where everybody should not be looking at Ron, which is so surprising to me because there's been numerous people who have also felt like Ron was a traitor. So I just don't understand. If y'all really genuinely feel like this, why when there's a new name brought up, we jump on that bandwagon? And Ron again tries to defend himself. Like, look, I'm always honest. We should look at Tara to being the traitor because I heard those light feet. And of course, she's taking that as a compliment. He, again, has no concrete evidence. And obviously, we know is 100% wrong. It's just crazy to me that he can be looked at as a traitor, but nobody really speaks up and says his name. I'll tell you one thing, though. This was the first episode so far this season. Michael stayed quiet through the whole thing. I didn't hear him through the whole episode. Not during breakfast, not during the challenge, besides when he was screaming out names, and definitely not at this round table. And he took Tiffany's advice because nobody else was saying his name. And I think that may help him moving forward as a faithful. So let's see if he stays quiet further on because he was aligning himself with Tiffany. And then he finds out tonight that Tiffany was actually gunning for him. So we get into the voting. Tiffany obviously voting for Jam Jam. Candace voting for Ron. But the majority at the table voted for Tiffany. And I felt so bad for her because these are all celebrities, right? And with a few of regular people who are just used to playing games. But Tiffany has not won on anything, not Big Brother, not the challenge. And she's always talks about her son. And she was like, look, I'm doing this for an actual purpose. I need this money. I have to put my son through college and stuff. And she's a single mother. So, of course, that touched some people. But regardless, it was majority. Like, literally, almost everybody voted for Tiffany to be banished. So Tiffany stood up there. She said a good speech and declared to everyone that she is a faithful. So Colton, sir, you just dug your hole. Everybody's not going to be looking at you because you were just so confident it was Tiffany. And I feel like once people feel like someone, again, is spitting out names and they're wrong and just really trying to get people to be on their side, it's because they're a traitor. And I genuinely will be surprised next episode if people still don't come after Colton after him being so wrong. So wrong in this banishment against Tiffany. And he was quiet. And this just goes to show you can be right one time. And it may only just be that one time. You push this narrative very strongly. Yes, you had Eric on the side co-signing with you, but you led that charge. And you were wrong. And the same thing that happened to Ron when he did the same exact thing and got Portia up out of there may also happen with Colton. So we'll see, because now the Traitors have to get together. So now the Traitors really have to come together, make the best strategic move. Yes, we have Ron in the grouping of getting rid of, but it just wouldn't be smart right now. Like, we already got eyes heavy on him. Let's keep it on him. They're considering other players like Monet possibly. I can see that. Johnny, that's random. It really doesn't stir anything. So we'll see what they do on the next episode. So episode 4 of the Traitors US season 4 proves something fundamental. This game is not won by being correct. It's won by controlling the narrative. Faithfuls just keep trying to justify choices logically, but the format rewards players who can make conviction feel like clarity. And that's exactly why Tiffany's banishment, while wrong, makes sense in the context of basic human psychology. It doesn't just send someone home in this episode, it shook the foundation of how players are thinking about evidence, perception, and trust. If you thought the early episodes were intense, this one makes it personal. That's our breakdown of the Traitors US Season 4, Episode 4. Let me know in the comments, were you surprised Tiffany was banished? Do you think the Faithfuls are overthinking logic and underestimating perception? Who do you trust the least heading into Episode 5? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell because we are going to see another dramatic turn, I'm sure. This is Indie Flicks, and until next time, trust no one.